The fluorescent lights in the 24-hour diner hummed with the same tired frequency as Zara Mitchell's thoughts. 3 a.m. on a Thursday, and she sat in a cracked vinyl booth with her laptop open, headphones in, transcribing a deposition for a law firm that paid her 22 cents per audio minute. The math was brutal. 45 minutes of recording would net her less than $10, and she'd been at it for 3 hours. Her coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but she kept sipping it anyway. Waste not, want not. That was what Grandma Evelyn used to say before the stroke took her ability to say much of anything at all. Zara's phone buzzed. She ignored it, fingers flying across the keyboard as a witness droned on about contract specifications and delivery dates. Legal language in 3 different accents: English, Mandarin-accented English, and heavily Nigerian-inflected English that most transcriptionists wouldn't catch the nuances of. But Zara spoke 5 languages fluently and could parse 7 more well enough to get by. The phone buzzed again, then again. With a sigh, she paused the recording and checked the screen. Marcus Chen, one of the few translation agency contacts who actually paid on time and didn't try to lowball her rates. She answered, "It's 3 in the morning, Marcus." I know, but I need you. Emergency contract negotiation, Italian and Mandarin translation. The client is willing to pay $5,000 for 4 hours of work. Zara's exhaustion evaporated. $5,000. That was 2 months of Grandma Evelyn's care facility bills. That was the difference between keeping her in the nice place with the garden and activities versus the state facility where residents sat in front of televisions all day, slowly fading into nothing. "What's the catch?" she asked, because there was always a catch with money like that. "The client is, let's call him private, very private. He runs import-export operations, legitimate business, but the people he deals with aren't always playing by standard rules. You'd need to sign an NDA. You'd need to be discreet. And Zara, you didn't hear this from me, but you might be walking into a room with people who handle problems in ways that don't involve lawyers." Her stomach tightened. She'd translated for plenty of shady businessmen before. Real estate developers who skirted zoning laws, importers who played fast and loose with customs regulations. But Marcus's careful phrasing suggested this was different. This was the kind of different that came with bodyguards and consequences. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. 5,000? She confirmed. Cash, tonight. The meeting is at 6 a.m. in Brooklyn. I'll text you the address. Zara looked at her laptop screen. At the 3 hours of transcription work that would earn her maybe $30. At the empty diner around her. At the life she'd been grinding through for 2 years since Grandma Evelyn's stroke had turned their world upside down. "Send me the address," she said. The warehouse in Red Hook didn't look like much from the outside. Weathered brick, industrial windows covered with grime, a loading dock that had seen better decades. But the black SUVs parked in the lot were new and expensive, and the men standing near them had the posture of people who knew how to handle themselves in ways that had nothing to do with gym memberships. Zara pulled her aging Honda into a spot near the entrance and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, second-guessing everything. She was 28 years old, 5'6" in her sensible flats, and she'd grown up in a household where Grandma Evelyn had raised her on stories about dignified survival and keeping your head down and never, ever getting mixed up with people who solved problems with violence. But $5,000. She grabbed her worn leather messenger bag, checked that her portable recording device was charged. She always recorded her translations for accuracy, with client permission, and stepped out into the pre-dawn cold. November in Brooklyn bit through her blazer. She should have worn a heavier coat, but the blazer was the most professional thing she owned, and first impressions mattered even when you were just the translator. One of the men near the SUV stepped forward as she approached. He was tall, built like a wall, with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "You Mitchell?" "Zara Mitchell. Marcus Chen sent me." He looked her up and down, his expression unreadable. "ID." She handed over her driver's license. He studied it under the light from his phone, then handed it back. "You carrying any weapons? Recording devices?" "I have a digital recorder for translation accuracy. It's standard practice." "And no weapons?" She opened her bag, showing him the contents. Laptop, recorder, pens, notepads, a granola bar she'd forgotten about. He nodded and spoke into a radio. "Translator's here, sending her up." Another man appeared to escort her inside. The warehouse interior had been converted into something that felt more like a corporate office than a criminal enterprise. Clean floors, proper lighting, a freight elevator that moved smoothly to the second floor. Her escort led her down a hallway to a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. Dawn was just starting to break, painting the sky in shades of gray and rose. Inside the conference room, 3 men waited. The first was in his 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Zara made in 6 months. Italian, she guessed from his posture and the particular way he held his espresso cup. The second was Chinese, perhaps 45, with wire-rimmed glasses and an expression of calculating patience. He sat perfectly still, hands folded on the table, but his eyes tracked every movement in the room. The third man stood near the windows, his back to her, phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in low, controlled Italian. Even from behind, he commanded attention. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been made specifically for his frame. Dark hair cut precisely, the kind of grooming that spoke of money and power. When he turned, Zara's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of face that belonged in old paintings. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, deep-set brown eyes that seemed to see everything and reveal nothing. There was something about him that felt dangerous. Not in an obvious way, but in the way a blade felt dangerous when you touched it, and realized too late it was sharp enough to cut. "You're the translator," he said, ending his call. His voice was deep, measured, with the faintest trace of an Italian accent smoothed by years in America. "Zara Mitchell, Marcus Chen sent me." "Dante Russo." He didn't offer his hand, just studied her with an intensity that made her want to shift her weight. "You speak Mandarin and Italian fluently?" "Yes. Also Spanish, French, and Portuguese. Some Arabic and Russian." Something flickered in his expression. Interest, maybe. "We're negotiating a shipping contract. These are my associates." He gestured to the older Italian man, Luca Ferretti, then to the Chinese man. "And our potential partners, Mr. Chen Wei and his translator." A fourth person had entered behind Zara, a young woman who nodded politely. Chen Wei's translator, presumably. "Standard confidentiality applies," Dante continued. "You translate exactly what's said. Nothing more, nothing less. You don't offer opinions. You don't interject. You're a voice, not a participant. Understood?" "Understood." "Good. We begin in 10 minutes. Coffee's on the side table." Zara moved to pour herself a cup, hyper-aware of Dante's gaze following her. She'd translated for powerful men before, but something about Dante Russo felt different. Maybe it was the way the other men in the room deferred to him without him having to demand it. Maybe it was the controlled violence she sensed beneath his polished exterior, like a wolf in an expensive suit. She settled into her chair, opened her notebook, tested her recorder. Dante nodded permission when she showed it to him, and prepared herself for what she assumed would be a straightforward, if ethically questionable, business negotiation. She had no idea she was about to save a man's empire and change her life forever. The meeting started simply enough. pleasantries in Italian and Mandarin, which Zara translated smoothly. Chen wanted to establish a shipping route through the port of New York, moving containers of electronics and textiles from Shenzhen to distribution centers in New Jersey. Dante's organization would provide port access, customs facilitation, and distribution networks. The IO profit split would be 60-40 in Chen Wei's favor, given the volume of goods being moved. Standard stuff. If you ignored the part where customs facilitation almost certainly meant bribing officials and distribution networks, probably involved operations that existed in legal gray areas. Zara translated mechanically, her mind partly on the words and partly on calculating how she'd allocate the $5,000. $1,800 to the care facility, $1,000 to catch up on her own rent. Maybe splurge on a new winter coat so she wouldn't freeze during early morning meetings in Brooklyn warehouses. Then the conversation shifted. Chen leaned forward, speaking in Mandarin. His translator, a nervous-looking woman named Lin, began to interpret, but Chen held up a hand and continued in Mandarin, looking directly at Zara. Mr. Russo, Zara translated, is concerned about the insurance on the shipments. In the event of loss or damage, who bears the cost? Dante's expression didn't change. Standard maritime insurance covers acts of God and accidents. Anything else is negotiated separately. I assume your shipments are properly documented? Chen smiled, still speaking in Mandarin. Of course, all documentation will be in order. Speaking of which, we'll need your signature on the routing agreements. My people have prepared the contracts. Lin, the other translator, slid a stack of documents across the table. Dante reached for them, but Luca Ferretti intercepted, scanning the pages with the careful attention of someone who'd reviewed 1,000 contracts. Zara watched the exchange, something nagging at the back of her mind. Chen phrasing had been odd. All documentation will be in order wasn't the same as all documentation is in order. It was future tense. Contingent. She'd spent enough time around people trying to manipulate language to recognize when words were being used as tools rather than communication. Luca frowned, flipping through the contract. He spoke to Dante in Italian. The routing schedules are vague, and the insurance clauses have exceptions I don't like. Dante took the contract, brown eyes scanning the dense legal text. Zara watched him read, saw the moment his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. These routes, Dante said in English, go through territories we don't control. That wasn't part of our initial discussion. Chen smile never wavered. He responded in Mandarin, and Zara translated, "The routes are the most efficient. Surely a man of your resources can manage the necessary arrangements with your colleagues in those territories." It was a test. Chen was seeing if Dante would admit weakness by acknowledging he couldn't guarantee safe passage through rival families' territories. Or if he'd agreed to terms that would put him in debt to those rivals, weakening his position. Zara kept her face neutral, but her mind raced. She glanced at the contract Luca held, catching glimpses of the text, aho. Mandarin reading skills were excellent, honed by years of translating technical documents, and something about the insurance clauses was wrong. "May I see the Chinese version of the contract?" Dante asked. Chen gestured, and Lin produced another stack of papers. Dante looked at Zara. "Compare them. Make sure they match." This wasn't unusual. Contracts in multiple languages often had discrepancies, sometimes accidental, sometimes very deliberate. Zara took both versions and began reading carefully, her heart rate increasing as she processed what she was seeing. The English version outlined standard insurance coverage with exceptions for criminal activity or intentional damage. The Mandarin version included an additional clause, buried in the dense legal language, stating that any losses incurred through territorial disputes or enforcement actions by regional authorities would be borne entirely by the receiving party, meaning Dante's organization. In other words, If Chen Wei's shipments got intercepted by Dante's rivals or by law enforcement, Dante would owe the full value of the goods. Given the volume they'd discussed, that could mean millions of dollars in liability. It was a trap. Chen Wei was setting Dante up to either lose a fortune or start a war with rival families when he tried to force passage through their territories. Zara's hands trembled slightly as she held the papers. This was beyond translation. This was recognizing a con in progress. And the smart thing, the safe thing, would be to translate exactly what was on the page and let these dangerous men sort out their own problems. But she thought about Grandma Evelyn, who'd raised her to be honest even when it cost you, who'd taught her that using your skills to help bad people do bad things made you complicit. And she thought about Dante Russo, who'd looked at her like she was a person rather than a convenience, who'd nodded respect when she'd listed her languages, who clearly didn't realize he was about to sign away his leverage and possibly his life. She set the papers down carefully. "The contracts don't match," she said quietly. The room went still. Dante's eyes locked on hers. "Explain." "The English version includes standard insurance language. The Mandarin version has an additional clause that makes you liable for any losses caused by territorial disputes or law enforcement action. Given the routes specified, which go through areas you don't control, you'd be assuming massive financial risk for shipments moving through hostile territory." Chen Wei's smile vanished. He snapped something in Mandarin, harsh and fast. Lin, the other translator, looked terrified. Zara translated calmly. "Mr. Chen says I'm mistaken. He says the contracts are identical." "Are they?" Dante asked, his voice dangerously soft. "No. I can show you line by line if you'd like." Dante held out his hand. Zara gave him both contracts and began pointing out the discrepancies, translating the Mandarin. Clause word by word. Luca Ferretti leaned in, his expression darkening as he realized what they'd nearly signed. Chen Wei stood abruptly, speaking rapid Mandarin. Zara didn't translate. Neither did Lin, who looked like she wanted to disappear through the floor. "Translate," Dante ordered, not taking his eyes off Chen Wei. Zara took a breath. "Mr. Chen says this is a misunderstanding, a clerical error by his legal team. He suggests we take a break and have his people revise the language to match." "Bullshit," Luca said in Italian. "They tried to screw us." Dante stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. When he spoke, his Italian was cold enough to frost the windows. "Tell Mr. Chen the deal is off. Tell him if I ever hear he's tried to operate in this port again, through any channel with any partner, I'll make sure every shipment he touches gets inspected so thoroughly by customs that he'll be lucky to move a toaster through here." Zara translated, her voice steady despite the tension crackling through the room. Chen Wei's face flushed. He spat something in Mandarin that Zara absolutely was not going to translate verbatim because it involved anatomically improbable suggestions and slurs about Dante's family. "He declines to continue the partnership," Zara said diplomatically. Dante smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I thought so. Luca, show them out." Chen Wei and Lin left quickly, escorted by the same men who'd brought Zara in. The moment the door closed, the atmosphere shifted. Luca burst into rapid Italian, pacing the room, gesturing wildly. Dante listened, his expression unreadable, until Luca finally ran out of steam. Then Dante turned to Zara. "You saved me from making a catastrophic mistake," he said quietly. "Do you understand what would have happened if I'd signed that contract? You would have been financially responsible for shipments moving through territory controlled by your rivals. They could have seized the goods, and you'd owed Chen Wei their full value. Or you could have tried to force the routes open, which would have started a war." "Exactly." He moved closer, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. "Most translators would have just translated what was on the page. Why didn't you?" Zara met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. Because I was raised to do the right thing, even when it's not convenient. And letting you walk into a trap didn't feel right. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Respect, maybe, or curiosity. Luca, pay her. Double the agreed amount, 10,000. Mr. Russo, that's not necessary. 10,000, Dante repeated. And make sure Marcus Chen knows we want her contact information. We'll be using her services again. Luca left to arrange the payment. Zara stood in the conference room with Dante Russo, dawn light streaming through the windows, and wondered what she'd just gotten herself into. I need your banking information, Dante said. I'll wire the money today. I appreciate that, but I can't accept payment beyond the agreed rate. He frowned. Why not? Because what I did wasn't about money. It was about doing my job correctly. If I take extra payment, it sets a precedent. Next time, someone might expect me to look the other way if the price is right. I can't afford that reputation. Dante stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're turning down $10,000? I'm accepting $5,000, which was the agreed rate. The rest would be a gift. And I don't take gifts from people I don't know. For a long moment, Dante said nothing. Then, impossibly, he laughed. It was a short, surprised sound, but genuine. You're either the most principled person I've ever met or the most naive. Maybe both, Zara said. Luca returned with a manila envelope. 5,000, as originally agreed. She wouldn't take more. I heard. Dante took the envelope and held it out to Zara. When she reached for it, he didn't let go immediately. If money isn't what motivates you, what does? Taking care of my grandmother, keeping her in a facility where they treat her like a person instead of a problem. That's what the 5,000 is for. Your grandmother is ill? She had a stroke 2 years ago. Can't speak? Can't walk. The care facility costs $1,800 a month, and insurance covers maybe half of that. Zara didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he'd asked like he actually wanted to know. I work 3 jobs to make up the difference. Dante's expression softened almost imperceptibly. 3 jobs. Transcription, translation, and teaching ESL classes at the community center. It's fine. I make it work. Clearly. He released the envelope. But if you ever need more work, translation or otherwise, you'll call me. It wasn't a question. I don't think I'm the kind of translator you need, Mr. Russo. I'm not good at looking the other way. That's exactly why I need you. He pulled a card from his pocket, expensive cardstock with just a name and phone number. No company, no title. You have integrity. That's rare in my world. Rare enough that I'm willing to pay a premium for it. Zara took the card, her fingers brushing his for a fraction of a second. She felt that contact like electricity, startling and impossible to ignore. I'll think about it. You do that. He moved toward the door, then paused. Zara Mitchell. You're going to make me regret meeting you, or thank God I did. I haven't decided which yet. Same to you, Mr. Russo. He smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed his entire face. For a moment, he didn't look like a dangerous man who ran criminal enterprises. He looked human, warm, even. Then the mask slipped back into place, and he was gone. Zara stood alone in the conference room, holding $5,000 in cash and a business card that felt heavier than it should. She'd come here to translate a contract. She'd left having seen, behind the curtain of a world she'd only glimpsed before. A world where words were weapons and honesty was currency, and one right choice could save someone's empire. She didn't know it yet, but Dante Russo wasn't going to let her walk away. Men like him didn't let valuable assets disappear, and Zara Mitchell had just proven herself to be very, very valuable indeed. The question was whether she'd accept what he was going to offer next, because Dante Russo always paid his debts, and he always got what he wanted, one way or another. 3 days passed before Dante Russo reappeared in Zara Mitchell's life. 3 days during which she paid Grandma Evelyn's care facility bill in full, caught up on her rent, and bought herself a winter coat that didn't have a broken zipper. 3 days of returning to her normal routine: transcription work at the diner, ESL classes at the community center, weekend translation gigs that paid by the hour. 3 days of telling herself that the business card tucked into her wallet was just a business card, nothing more. She was walking out of Sunrise Gardens Care Facility on a gray Sunday afternoon when she saw the black SUV parked across the street. The same model she'd seen at the warehouse in Red Hook. Her steps slowed, instinct prickling at the base of her spine. The rear door opened, and Dante Russo stepped out. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket over a black sweater, somehow looking both more casual and more dangerous than he had in his tailored suit. His eyes found hers across the street, and he didn't smile. He just waited. Zara crossed to him, very aware of the cold November wind cutting through her new coat. "Mr. Russo." "Dante," he corrected. "We're past formalities, don't you think?" "Are we? I translated one contract for you. That doesn't exactly make us friends." "No," he agreed, "but it makes us something. I haven't decided what yet." He gestured to the SUV. "Can we talk?" "5 minutes. I'll have my driver take you wherever you need to go afterward." Every rational instinct told her to decline, to walk away from whatever this was before it became something she couldn't control. But curiosity was a powerful thing, and so was the memory of how Dante had looked at her in that conference room. Like she mattered. Like she was more than just a service provider. 5 minutes, she said. The interior of the SUV was warm, leather seats soft beneath her. Dante slid in beside her, maintaining a respectful distance as the driver pulled into traffic. The privacy screen was up, giving them the illusion of being alone despite the man behind the wheel. "How's your grandmother?" Dante asked. The question surprised her. "How did you—" "You mentioned she was in a care facility. This is the nicest one in Brooklyn. It wasn't hard to deduce." He pulled out his phone, showed her a photograph on the screen. Sunrise Gardens website. "I looked into it. They have an excellent reputation. Good staff-to-patient ratio, activities, therapy programs. Your grandmother is lucky to have someone willing to work 3 jobs to keep her here." Zara's defenses rose. "Are you having me investigated?" "I'm being thorough. It's how I stay alive in my line of work." Dante pocketed his phone. "But I'm not here to talk about due diligence. I'm here to make you an offer." "I already told you I won't take more money for the translation." "This isn't about the translation. This is about a job. A real one, not piecemeal contracts through Marcus Chen." He shifted to face her fully. "I need someone I can trust to handle sensitive communications. Translation, interpretation, document review. The kind of work you did at the warehouse, but on a regular basis. You need a translator on staff. I need someone with integrity who understands nuance and isn't afraid to tell me when something's wrong, even if it's not their job." His brown eyes held hers. "That's rare, Zara. Rare enough that I'm willing to pay you a salary that would let you quit your other jobs." Her heart rate kicked up. "How much are we talking?" $12,000 a month, health insurance included, which would cover your grandmother under a family plan, plus a discretionary budget for anything she needs that the facility doesn't provide." The number hit her like a physical force. $12,000 a month. That was more than she made in 3 months of grinding through transcription and ESL classes and weekend translation gigs. That was stability. Security. The ability to breathe without constantly calculating which bill to pay late. "What's the catch?" she asked, because there was always a catch. "The catch is that you'd be working for me, in my world with my people, dealing with situations that exist in legal gray areas and sometimes darker shades than that." Dante's voice was steady, unflinching. "You'd see things that would make you uncomfortable. You'd be translating conversations about shipments that aren't entirely legal, negotiations with people who solve problems with violence. You'd be complicit by proximity, even if you never directly participated. So you want to buy my silence along with my skills. I want to employ someone whose judgment I trust, someone who won't sell me out to my enemies or the FBI, but who also won't lie to me about what a contract actually says. He leaned back against the seat. You proved you have both qualities. The question is whether you're willing to use them in a world that doesn't play by the rules you were raised with. Zara looked out the window at Brooklyn streaming past. Gray buildings, gray sky, people bundled against the cold going about their lives. She thought about Grandma Evelyn, who'd worked as a nurse for 40 years, who'd raised Zara on stories about dignity and honesty, and never compromising your principles for convenience. My grandmother taught me that you don't get involved with criminals, she said quietly, that people who make money from hurting others are poison, no matter how much they smile or how well they dress. She's right, Dante said, surprising her. My world is poison. It corrupts almost everyone who touches it. The question is whether you think you're strong enough to work in it without being destroyed by it. And you think I am? I think you turned down $10,000 on principle when you could have just taken the money and walked away. I think you risked pissing off a potential client by exposing a con instead of staying silent. That takes a kind of strength most people don't have. He paused. But I also think you're desperate enough to consider an offer you'd normally reject, because the alternative is watching your grandmother get moved to a state facility where she won't get the care she needs. The accuracy of the assessment stung because it was true. Zara was desperate. She'd been desperate for 2 years, ever since the stroke had stolen Grandma Evelyn's independence and left Zara scrambling to cover medical bills and care costs that insurance barely touched. If I say yes, she began carefully, I need conditions. Name them. I won't translate anything involving human trafficking, child exploitation, or violence against innocents. I don't care how much you pay me. Those are hard lines. Dante's expression didn't change. Agreed. I don't deal in any of those things anyway. Drugs, weapons, stolen goods occasionally, but nothing that involves harming people who didn't choose to be in the game. I want the right to refuse assignments that cross my personal ethics. You can fire me for it, but you can't force me to participate. Fair. What else? My grandmother's care is non-negotiable. If something happens to me, if I get arrested or killed because of this work, I need a guarantee that her bills keep getting paid. Something flickered across Dante's face. Respect, maybe, or recognition of the kind of love that made someone plan for their own death. I'll set up a trust, managed by a lawyer who doesn't know either of us, enough to cover her care for the rest of her life, released only if something happens to you. You'll have the documentation by end of week. Zara's throat tightened. He'd agreed to all of her conditions without hesitation, without negotiation. Either he'd expected them, or he wanted her working for him badly enough that the terms didn't matter. Why me? She asked. You must have a dozen translators you could hire, people already in your world who understand how it works. I have translators who do what they're told and don't ask questions. I have people who are loyal because I pay them or because they're afraid of me. Dante's gaze was intense, unwavering. What I don't have is someone who'll tell me the truth even when it costs them something. Someone who sees the trap in a contract and exposes it instead of letting me walk into it. That kind of honesty is worth more than loyalty, Zara. Because loyalty can be bought or broken. Integrity can't. The SUV pulled to a stop outside her apartment building in Crown Heights. Zara hadn't given the driver the address, which meant Dante really had done his research. She should have been angry about the invasion of privacy. Instead, she felt a strange sense of inevitability, like this moment had been coming since the second she decided to tell him about the contract discrepancy. "I need time to think," she said. "Take 48 hours. After that, the offer expires." Dante pulled a different business card from his pocket, this one with an actual company name printed on it, Russo Logistics and Distribution. "Call the number when you decide. Someone will arrange the details." Zara took the card, her fingers brushing his again. That same electric contact, impossible to ignore. "And if I say no?" "Then I'll respect your decision and make sure Marcus Chen knows you're off limits for the kind of work that might put you in danger." Dante's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "But I hope you say yes. I think we could do good work together, Zara Mitchell." She climbed out of the SUV, standing on the cold sidewalk as the vehicle pulled away. In her hand, she held a business card and the weight of a decision that would change everything. Zara visited Grandma Evelyn every day, but Sunday evenings were special. That was when she'd sit in the common room and read aloud from the book they'd been working through together. Currently, it was Maya Angelou's autobiography, which Grandma Evelyn had loved when she could still read herself. Now she sat in her wheelchair by the window, eyes tracking Zara's face as she read, occasionally making small sounds that might have been agreement or simply acknowledgement that she was listening. The stroke had stolen her ability to form words, but her mind was still sharp. Zara could see it in her eyes, in the way she'd squeeze Zara's hand at meaningful passages. "Grandma," Zara said, setting the book aside, "I need to tell you something." Evelyn Mitchell's eyes focused, alert and questioning. "I got a job offer, a really good one. Enough money that I could quit the diner work and the weekend translations. Enough that we wouldn't have to worry about bills anymore." Zara took her grandmother's hand, feeling the papery skin and fragile bones. "But it's working for someone you wouldn't approve of, someone who operates outside the law." Evelyn made a sound, her expression concerned. "I know what you'd say if you could talk. That money earned from illegal activity is dirty money, that I should find another way, work harder, keep my integrity intact." Zara's voice cracked. "But Grandma, I'm so tired. I'm tired of choosing which bills to pay late. I'm tired of working until 3 in the morning and getting up at 6 for the next job. I'm tired of being afraid that one unexpected expense will be the thing that breaks us." Her grandmother's hand squeezed hers, weak but deliberate. "He's not a good man," Zara continued. "Dante Russo, he runs operations that hurt people, that break laws, that contribute to systems I've spent my life opposing. But he's also offering me a way to keep you here, in this place where they treat you with dignity, where you have activities and therapy and people who know your name." Tears streamed down her face. "Is it wrong that I'm considering it? Is it wrong that I want to say yes?" Evelyn's other hand, the one that retained slightly more mobility, lifted shakily to Zara's cheek. She wiped away tears with trembling fingers, her eyes so full of love and understanding that Zara broke down completely. They sat like that for a long time, grandmother and granddaughter, holding each other in the fading Sunday light. When Zara finally composed herself, she found Evelyn looking at her with an expression that was part sadness, part acceptance, and part something else. Permission, maybe, or forgiveness in advance. "I love you," Zara whispered. "Whatever I decide, that doesn't change." Evelyn's hand squeezed again, and Zara understood. Love didn't require approval. Love didn't demand that people make only noble choices. Love existed in the messy reality of difficult decisions and impossible situations. She'd raised Zara to be honest and principled, but she'd also raised her to survive. Monday evening, Zara called the number on the business card. A woman answered on the second ring. "Russo Logistics." "This is Zara Mitchell. I'm calling about a position with Mr. Russo." "One moment, please." The hold music was classical, something Italian that Zara didn't recognize. Then a different voice came on the line, male, professional, with an accent similar to Dante's, but older. Miss Mitchell, this is Luca Ferretti, Mr. Russo's operations manager. We met briefly at the warehouse. Zara remembered him, the silver-haired man who'd been ready to sign the contract before she'd exposed the trap. Mr. Russo said you'd be calling. Should I assume you're accepting the position? Yes, Zara said, the word feeling both terrifying and right. I accept. Excellent. We'll need you to come to the office tomorrow to complete paperwork. 9 a.m. The address is on the card. Dress professionally. You'll be meeting with HR and legal. Then Mr. Russo wants to brief you personally on your initial assignments. I'll be there. Good. And Miss Mitchell? Welcome to the organization. We're glad to have someone with your particular talents. The call ended, leaving Zara standing in her tiny apartment, wondering what she'd just agreed to. She'd crossed a line, stepped from the world of legitimate struggle into the shadows where Dante Russo operated. There was no going back from this. No pretending she was just an innocent translator hired for isolated jobs. She was part of his organization now, and somewhere in Brooklyn, Dante Russo smiled when Luca called to confirm that Zara Mitchell had said yes. The offices of Russo Logistics occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Dumbo, with views of the Manhattan Bridge and the East River. Nothing about the lobby suggested criminal enterprise. It looked like any successful import-export business. Modern furniture, expensive art, staff moving with professional efficiency. Zara arrived at 8:45, wearing her best interview suit and the new coat. The receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s, smiled warmly. Zara Mitchell, Mr. Ferretti is expecting you. 10th floor, he'll meet you at the elevator. The elevator was glass and steel, rising smoothly through the building. Zara watched the city expand below her, feeling like she was ascending into a different world entirely. Luca waited when the doors opened, looking every bit the professional executive in a tailored navy suit. Miss Mitchell, right on time. Follow me. He led her through an open floor plan where people worked at computer stations, spoke quietly on phones, managed spreadsheets and logistics software that tracked shipments and routes. It looked utterly legitimate, and maybe some of it was. Dante had mentioned legal operations mixed with the illegal ones. This is where we coordinate container movements through the port, Luca explained. Scheduling, customs documentation, distribution logistics. You won't work here. Your office is upstairs with executive staff. They took another elevator to the 11th floor, which had a completely different feel. Fewer people, more closed doors, the sense of conversations happening behind soundproofed walls. Luca showed her to a corner office with windows overlooking the bridge. This is yours. Computer, phone, access to our secure document system. Your login credentials will be provided by IT this afternoon. He gestured to the desk, which held a laptop and 2 monitors. You'll primarily work with contracts, correspondence, and real-time translation during meetings. Mr. Russo prefers in-person interpretation to phone or video when possible. Understood. HR and legal are down the hall. They'll process your employment paperwork, including the NDA and the trust arrangement for your grandmother. Everything should be finalized by end of day. Luca's expression softened slightly. Mr. Russo takes care of his people, Miss Mitchell. As long as you're loyal and competent, you'll find this a very secure position. And if I'm not loyal, then you'll find it a very short one. The threat was delivered calmly, without malice, which somehow made it more effective. Zara nodded, accepting the reality of what she'd agreed to. Mr. Russo will see you at 11. Until then, get settled. Maria from HR will be here shortly to start the onboarding process. The morning passed in a blur of paperwork. Employment contracts, tax forms, benefits enrollment, and the most thorough NDA Zara had ever seen. She signed everything, each signature feeling like another step deeper into Dante's world. The trust documentation arrived last, delivered by a lawyer who explained the terms in careful detail. If anything happened to Zara, death, incapacitation, incarceration, the trust would activate automatically, paying Grandma Evelyn's care facility bills in full until her death. The principal was substantial enough to cover decades of care. Mr. Russo established this trust yesterday, the lawyer said, before you'd even accepted the position. He was confident you'd say yes. Zara didn't know whether to be flattered or disturbed by that confidence. At 11 precisely, Luca appeared at her office door. He's ready for you. Dante's office occupied the entire corner of the 12th floor, windows on two sides offering panoramic views of Brooklyn and Manhattan. The space was minimalist but expensive: dark wood furniture, leather seating, artwork that was probably worth more than Zara's entire apartment building. Dante stood at the window, phone to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. He looked different than he had in the SUV, back in his armor of tailored suits and controlled power. When he saw her, he ended the call mid-sentence. "Zara, come in. Close the door." She did, very aware of the weight of his attention as he studied her. "You look nervous." "I am nervous. This is my first day working for a criminal organization." He smiled, unexpected and genuine. "At least you're honest about it. Sit." Zara took one of the chairs across from his desk. Dante sat as well, leaning back with the ease of someone completely comfortable with power. "Your first assignment," he began, "is to review contracts for a series of real estate acquisitions we're making in Red Hook. Entirely legal purchases, but some of the sellers are Chinese and Russian nationals who prefer to negotiate in their native languages. I need you to ensure the English translations match the source documents." "That's straightforward." "It is. I'm starting you on simple work while you acclimate. But Zara, understand this. What you did at the warehouse, catching that discrepancy, that will be your primary value to me. I need someone who sees what others miss, who understands that in my world, a misplaced word in a contract can cost lives." "I understand." "Do you?" He leaned forward, expression serious. "Because once you're fully integrated into this organization, once you've seen the things I need you to see, there's no going back. You can't unknow what you learn here. You can't untangle yourself from the connections you'll make. This isn't a job you quit with 2 weeks' notice and a pleasant goodbye." Zara met his gaze steadily. "Then I suppose I'd better make sure I'm indispensable enough that you never want me to leave." Something heated flashed in Dante's eyes. "Careful, Zara. That sounds dangerously close to ambition." "Is ambition a problem? In my world? It's currency." He stood, moving to the bar cart near the window. "Drink." "It's 11 in the morning. We're celebrating your first day. Humor me." He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid that was probably whiskey expensive enough to pay a month's rent. He handed her one. "To dangerous partnerships and the people brave enough to accept them." Zara clinked her glass against his, the crystal ringing clear in the quiet office. The whiskey burned smooth down her throat, warmth spreading through her chest. "Name your price," Dante said quietly, watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "That's what I wanted to say in the SUV but didn't. You turned down my money at the warehouse. So I'm asking now. What do you actually want, Zara Mitchell? What's the price for your loyalty beyond the salary and the trust fund?" The question was more intimate than it should have been, more weighted. "I want to know that the work I do for you doesn't destroy innocent people," she said finally. "I want to believe that somewhere in all of this," she gestured around the office, "there's a line you won't cross, that you're not just another monster in an expensive suit. And if I am, then I'll deal with that when I have to. But I don't think you are. I think you're a man doing terrible things for complicated reasons. And I think maybe, if I'm here, I can make sure some of those terrible things are slightly less terrible." Dante set his glass down and moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You're going to be either the best decision I've ever made or the thing that destroys me. I haven't decided which yet. You said that before. I mean it more now. His hand came up, not quite touching her face, hovering just close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin. Welcome to my world, Zara. Try not to let it swallow you whole. Then he stepped back, the moment breaking like glass. Luca will bring you the contracts this afternoon. Take your time with them. I'd rather have accuracy than speed. Dismissed, Zara stood and moved toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. Dante? Yes? Thank you. For the trust. For my grandmother. You didn't have to do that before I accepted. Yes, I did, he said quietly. Because I needed you to know I keep my promises. That when I say I'll take care of something, I mean it. Zara left his office with her heart racing and the taste of expensive whiskey on her tongue. She'd accepted his offer, signed his contracts, stepped into his world. Now she just had to survive it. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she wondered if surviving was really the goal anymore, or if she'd already begun to want something more dangerous. Something that looked a lot like the future Dante Russo was offering. Even if that future was built on foundations she'd sworn never to stand on. The first 3 weeks working for Dante Russo passed in a careful dance of professional boundaries and unspoken tension that pulled tighter with each passing day. Zara reviewed contracts, translated correspondence, sat in on meetings where men discussed shipments and territories, and profit margins in languages they thought were secret. She learned the rhythm of Dante's organization, the legitimate businesses that funded the illegal ones, the careful accounting that kept everything compartmentalized, the network of loyalty and fear that held it all together. She also learned Dante himself. He arrived at the office before dawn, already on his second espresso by the time she got there at 8. He worked with focused intensity, managing a dozen operations simultaneously, making decisions that affected hundreds of people with the same calm precision he applied to everything. He was ruthless when necessary, but never cruel. Fair in his dealings, even with enemies, and he kept his word, always, even when it cost him. The trust fund for Grandma Evelyn had been funded within 48 hours. Zara's health insurance activated immediately, covering her grandmother under a family plan that was better than anything Zara could have afforded in 5 years of saving. The salary deposited into her account on the 1st and 15th like clockwork, exactly as promised. Dante took care of his people. That much was undeniable. What was also undeniable was the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. The way his hand would linger on her shoulder when he leaned over to review a document. The way he'd positioned her office directly across from his, close enough that she could see him through the glass walls whenever she glanced up. They hadn't crossed any lines, but the lines were there, visible and tempting, growing thinner every day. It was a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks and 4 days into her employment, when everything changed. Zara was reviewing a shipping manifest, comparing the English and Mandarin versions for discrepancies, when raised voices erupted from Dante's office. She looked up to see him standing at his window, phone pressed to his ear, his entire body rigid with controlled fury. Luca appeared at her door moments later, his expression grim. Conference room, now, we need translation. The conference room on the 12th floor was already crowded when Zara entered. Dante stood at the head of the table, flanked by Luca and 2 other men she recognized as senior associates. On the large monitor mounted to the wall, a video call showed 3 Chinese men in what looked like an office in Shanghai. Sit, Dante said without looking at her, gesturing to the chair beside him. Translate everything, word for word. Zara opened her laptop, started recording, and focused on the screen. The man in the center, older with steel gray hair and cold eyes, began speaking in Mandarin. "Mr. Russo," Zara translated, keeping her voice steady. "We appreciate your patience with our previous arrangement. However, circumstances have changed. The routes you've been using through our territories in Flushing and Sunset Park now require additional compensation." Dante's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. "We have a contract. The terms were agreed upon 6 months ago. They don't change without mutual consent." Zara translated. The gray-haired man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Contracts are negotiable when circumstances change. Our people have noticed increased activity from your rivals in those areas. Providing you continued access puts us at risk. That risk requires compensation. An additional 30% on all shipments moving through our territory." 30%, Dante repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "That's not negotiation, that's extortion. Call it what you like, those are the new terms." Zara translated the exchange mechanically, but her mind raced. She'd reviewed the contract Dante had with these men. It was ironclad, with specific provisions about rate changes requiring 90 days' notice and written documentation. This ambush was a violation, designed to force Dante into either accepting unfavorable terms or losing critical routes. Dante leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. "Let me be very clear. I don't respond well to threats or surprise renegotiations. If you want to discuss adjusting our arrangement, we do it properly. With notice, with documentation, with terms that benefit both parties." The gray-haired man's expression hardened. "You misunderstand the situation, Mr. Russo. This isn't a negotiation, it's a notification. Either you pay the new rates, or you find new routes. We don't care which." Something shifted in Dante's expression, a flash of calculation so quick Zara almost missed it. When he spoke again, his Italian was directed at Luca. "Pull up the Lee family's shipping records. Everything from the past 6 months." Luca's fingers flew across his laptop. Within seconds, data filled a second monitor. Spreadsheets showing container movements, dates, locations, and contents. Dante studied the information, then smiled. It was a predator's smile, all teeth and no warmth. He switched back to English, looking directly at the camera. "I notice your shipments through the port of Newark have increased 40% in the last quarter. Interesting timing, given that my people control the customs inspection schedule at that port. It would be unfortunate if those inspections became more thorough." The gray-haired man's expression flickered. "Just for a second, but enough. We also provide security for 3 warehouses in Red Hook, where your goods are stored temporarily before distribution." Dante continued, his voice casual, conversational. "I'd hate for that security to become unreliable. Things go missing in unsecured warehouses. Sometimes entire shipments disappear. You're threatening us. I'm explaining consequences. You want to renegotiate our agreement? Fine. Let's negotiate properly. But if you think you can ambush me with ultimatums and expect me to fold, you've badly misread the situation." Dante leaned closer to the camera. "I don't pay extortion. Ever. So here's my counteroffer. We continue under the existing terms, or we both lose. Your shipments get delayed indefinitely by customs. Your warehouses become unreliable. And the routes through my territory that you use for your own operations? Those close. Immediately." Silence stretched across the video call. The 3 men on screen conferred in rapid Mandarin, their voices too low for clear translation. Finally, the gray-haired man turned back to the camera. "We may have been hasty in our approach. Perhaps we can discuss this more reasonably. Perhaps you can honor the contract you signed and stop wasting my time," Dante shot back. "If you have legitimate concerns about security in Flushing or Sunset Park, document them. Send me the data. We'll discuss appropriate adjustments through proper channels. But you don't get to manufacture a crisis and demand 30% more without justification." More muttered conversation in Mandarin. Then, we'll prepare documentation and contact you next week to schedule a proper meeting. You do that. Dante ended the call without waiting for a response. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Zara watched Dante's shoulders rise and fall with a controlled breath before he turned to face his associates. Luca, I want eyes on every Lee family operation we're connected to. Shipments, warehouses, personnel. If they sneeze, I want to know about it. Already on it. And get me a meeting with the families in Flushing and Sunset Park. I want to know if there's actually increased rival activity, or if the Lee family is manufacturing problems to justify a rate increase. I'll make the calls. Dante's gaze swept the room, landing last on Zara. Everyone out, except you. The associates filed out quickly. When the door closed, leaving them alone, Dante moved to the windows overlooking the East River. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at the gray December sky. You handled that well, Zara said quietly. The threat assessment was smart. They backed down. This time, Dante turned to face her. But they'll try again. Different approach, different leverage. That's how it works in my world. Constant testing, constant pressure, everyone looking for weakness. You didn't show any. I showed plenty. I showed that I'm willing to burn bridges if pushed. That's not strength, Zara. That's desperation disguised as power. He moved closer, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. Do you know what happens if this escalates? If the Lee family decides to push harder? People get hurt. People die. My people. Their people. Innocent people who happen to be in the wrong place when violence spills over. His voice was heavy with a weight she'd never heard before. That's the cost of this life. That's what I deal with every single day. Making decisions that might get people killed, then living with the consequences when they do. Zara stood, crossing to where he stood by the windows. Is that what happened with your father? The question hung between them, dangerous and intimate. She'd learned pieces of Dante's history over the past 3 weeks, that his father had built the organization, that he'd died when Dante was 25, that Dante had taken over and spent the last decade expanding what his father had started. But the details remained shadowy, unspoken. My father was killed because he showed weakness at the wrong moment, Dante said finally. He trusted someone he shouldn't have, made a deal without proper verification. The person he trusted sold him out to rivals, and he was ambushed leaving a restaurant in Little Italy. 3 bullets. Dead before the ambulance arrived. I'm sorry. Don't be. He made a mistake, and he paid for it. That's the business. Dante's brown eyes met hers. But it taught me something important. In this world, trust is the most dangerous thing you can offer someone, because the moment you trust the wrong person, you're dead. Is that why you hired me? Because I proved I could be trusted? I hired you because you're the first person in a decade who told me the truth when lying would have been easier and more profitable. His hand came up to touch her face, fingers gentle against her cheek. And because every day you walk into this office, knowing what I am and what I do, and you still look at me like I'm human, like I'm more than just the monster running the empire. Zara's breath caught. They were standing too close, the air between them charged with everything they'd been carefully not acknowledging for 3 weeks. Dante, I know this is inappropriate. I know you work for me, that there's a power dynamic, that this crosses every professional boundary. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But I need you to understand something. What I feel for you, it's not about control or possession. It's not about having another asset in my organization. What is it about? It's about the fact that you make me want to be better than I am. That you see the worst of my world and still believe there might be something worth saving in me. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. It's about how every morning when you walk through that door, I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time since the previous evening when you left. Zara should have stepped back, should have reminded him about professional boundaries and the ethics of workplace relationships and the fact that she'd been employed for less than a month. Instead, she found herself asking, "What do you want from me, Dante?" "Everything," he said simply. "Your loyalty, your honesty, your presence in my life in whatever capacity you're willing to give it. I want you beside me in meetings, translating words and reading people, and catching the traps I'm too close to see. I want you in my office at the end of long days, reminding me why I'm trying to build something better than what my father left me. I want—" He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his features. "I want you to choose me, not because I pay you or because I can provide for your grandmother, because you want to be here." "I do want to be here," Zara admitted, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "I tell myself it's about the money and the security and taking care of Grandma Evelyn. But that's not the whole truth anymore. I want to be here because of you, because you're brilliant and terrifying and somehow more honest about your dishonesty than most honest people I've known." Dante's hand slid into her hair, cradling the back of her head. "Then let me be clear about what I'm offering. Not just employment, not just protection, a partnership, you and me, building something together, making this organization into something that does less harm, that operates with more integrity, that proves you can exist in this world without becoming a complete monster." "That's a lot to ask." "I know, and I know I have no right to ask it, but I'm asking anyway." His forehead rested against hers, breath warm against her lips. "Name your price, Zara. Tell me what you need from me to make this real, to make us real." "I need you to promise me something," she whispered. "Anything. Promise me that you'll keep trying to be better, that you won't use my presence as an excuse to justify things you know are wrong, that we'll both hold each other accountable, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something. I promise. And promise me that if I ever need to walk away, if I ever reach a line I can't cross, you'll let me go. No threats, no manipulation, no using my grandmother as leverage." Something painful flashed across his face, but he nodded. "I promise. Even though the thought of you leaving destroys me, if that's what you need, I'll let you go." Zara pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "I'm not planning to leave. I'm planning to stay and drive you absolutely crazy with my questions and my ethics, and my refusal to just accept that this is how things have to be." Dante laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. "You already drive me crazy." "Good. Someone needs to." The kiss happened inevitably, like gravity finally winning a battle it had been fighting for weeks. His lips were soft against hers, questioning at first, then deepening when she responded. Zara's hands slid up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the strength there, the controlled power that he kept so carefully leashed, except in moments like this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers again. "This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. We're going to complicate everything." "Absolutely. And you're still willing?" Zara pulled back to look at him fully, at this complicated, dangerous man who'd somehow become essential to her in less than a month. "I'm terrified. But yes, I'm willing." "Then we do this right," Dante said firmly. "No secrets between us about the business. You see everything, know everything, have full transparency about what you're involved in. If something crosses your lines, you tell me immediately. We figure it out together or we don't do it at all." "Agreed." "And we keep this private from the organization for now. Not because I'm ashamed, but because I need them to respect you as my translator and advisor, not dismiss you as the boss's girlfriend." "That's practical. I can work with that." "Anything else?" Zara smiled, something warm and certain blooming in her chest. Take me to dinner. Somewhere nice. Let's pretend we're normal people on a normal date, just for one evening. You want normal? With me? Dante looked genuinely surprised. I want to know who you are when you're not being the terrifying mafia boss. When you're just Dante Russo, the man who makes terrible decisions and apparently has feelings for his translator. That man is significantly less impressive. Let me be the judge of that. They had dinner that night at a small Italian restaurant in Carroll Gardens, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and an owner who greeted Dante like family. They talked about everything except business, her childhood with Grandma Evelyn, his memories of his mother before she'd left, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel. For 3 hours, they were just two people getting to know each other. And when Dante walked her to her door at the end of the night, kissing her softly under the streetlight, Zara realized she'd made her choice completely. She was in this now. In Dante's world. In his organization. In whatever this thing between them was becoming. And for the first time in 2 years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Even if that place was dangerous. Even if it meant compromising principles she'd thought were absolute. Even if it meant building a life on foundations that would horrify the grandmother who'd raised her. Because sometimes the right choice wasn't the safe one, sometimes it was the choice that made you feel alive, and Dante Russo made her feel more alive than she'd felt in years. The next morning, Zara arrived at the office to find a package on her desk. Inside was a new laptop, top of the line, with a note in Dante's precise handwriting. For the woman who sees what others miss. Thank you for choosing to stay. D. She smiled, tucking the note into her desk drawer like a secret worth keeping. Across the hall, through the glass walls, Dante looked up from his computer. Their eyes met, and he smiled. Not the dangerous smile he showed enemies or the professional smile he gave associates, but something genuine and warm and entirely hers. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a struggling translator taking a desperate job with a criminal organization. Now she was something else entirely. Partner. Advisor. The woman who'd named her price and found it wasn't money, or security, or even promises. It was honesty, transparency, the chance to be seen fully and chosen anyway. And as she opened her laptop to start the day's work, translating contracts and catching traps, and helping Dante build something slightly less terrible than what he'd inherited, Zara Mitchell realized that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was exactly what you'd promised yourself you'd never do. Fall for a man whose world could destroy you, and trust him not to let it. The real question now was whether that trust would save them both, or doom them. But Zara was willing to find out. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.